everybody. Thanks for clicking on this video. Today we're going to be working with partial fraction decomposition. If you want to follow along, the links to the companion worksheet are in the description below. Also, don't forget to click that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all the videos that we have coming out from the channel. So let's get started. Now what we're given is a fraction with multiple factors in the denominator. So here we have one factor, x plus 2. We have another factor, x minus 4. And what we want to do is we want to break this down into its component parts, because the way we got this was we took something over x plus 2 and we added something over x minus 4 to arrive at this fraction, 3x over this quantity, x plus 2 times x minus 4. And the idea of partial fraction decomposition is to figure out what is that. Now when we do this, we say, well, both of these are linear factors. So these have powers of 1 on x. And so what's in the numerator is something less than that, because if it was an equal or higher power, we would break it down. So we're going to call this number a. We're going to call this number b. And so a and b are what we're solving for. We're not solving for x. A lot of people make that mistake when they're doing partial fractions. Don't worry about x. We're not solving for it. So what do? Well, once we set it up, we're going to multiply all of these denominators away. And the quick and easy way is to take this quantity right here and multiply it. So we're going to multiply x plus 2 times x minus 4 onto everything. So if I multiply this quantity over here, we're going to be left with 3x. If we multiply this quantity over here, the x plus 2 will cancel, leaving a times x minus 4. If we multiply this quantity onto x minus 4, the b over x minus 4, the x minus 4's cancel, leaving b times x plus 2. Now we'll expand these out. We have 3x equals ax minus 4a plus bx plus 2b. All right. Now at this point, what we have to do is we have to break this up into several different equations. Now, how do we do that? Well, notice that these two terms have an x, ax and bx. And so what does that equal? Well, that has to equal 3x. So down here, I'm going to write 3x equals ax plus bx. And so combining ax and bx together is going to give us that. It's not, and we don't include the minus 4a and the plus 2b because they don't have an x attached to them. And so over here, we have to ask, well, what are these equal to? Well, these have no x, so they should equal a constant number. So minus 4a plus 2b equals, now what's over here? Well, there is no constant, there's just this. So what constant is that? It's 0. So anytime you're looking for something and it's not there, it's 0. Now this equation in red, we don't need the x's. So what we can do is we can just drop the x's and say 3 equals a plus b. Now for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to solve this system by hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the 4a over. So 4a equals 2b, and then we'll divide this equation by 2. So that gives us 2a equals b. So now this allows us to make a substitution. So we can take this equation, 3 equals a plus b, and instead of b, we're going to put 2a. So 3 equals 3a, so a equals 1. And now that we know that a equals 1, we can say 3 equals 1 plus b, so b has to equal 2. So this fraction decomposition, it works like this. We have 3x over x plus 2 times x minus 4. And that equals a, which we said was a over x plus 2. So that's going to be 1 over x plus 2 because that's the value we found for a. And then b is 2. So that's going to be plus 2 over x minus 4. So this is how we break down this one fraction into 2, and we separate out the factors. So let's try another one. Now for this one, our first original denominator is not given to us in factored form, so we have to factor it first. So we have x on top over, and so it's a quadratic, so we're going to factor it into two things, and we need two numbers that multiply to positive 6 and add to negative 5. And so that's going to be minus 2 and minus 3. So now we have our two factors. So our denominator is going to be, our partial fraction, is going to be a over the denominator x minus 2 plus b over the denominator x minus 3. Again, these are degree 1s, so we have degree 0s. These are just numbers. Now we multiply by this denominator, x minus 2 times x minus 3. So we have x over on the left equals a times, now when we multiply this, the x minus 2's cancel, leaving x minus 3. Plus b. We multiply this by x minus 3, and we have x minus 2 left. So we'll expand this out. X equals ax minus 3a plus bx minus 2b. And again, like the last one, we have to separate this into several equations. Ax and bx have x's, and that equals x. Now again, the fact that there are x's there isn't important. What's important are the numbers in front of x. So to save ourselves some time, we can write 1, drop the x, equals a, drop the x, plus b, drop the x. Now, what's left? Well, we have minus 3a and minus 2b. And what does that equal? That equals 0. All right. So now, these are our two equations that we want to solve for. So this one, we'll work this one out by hand. We'll solve it for a. So we subtract b to the other side. So 1 minus b equals a. So now we can substitute this quantity into this equation down below. So 0 equals negative 3, and in place of a, we put 1 minus b minus 2b. So we distribute the negative 3. Negative 3 plus 3b minus 2b. And the b's will combine, so we have minus 3 plus b. So that means when we add the 3 over to the other side, we get 3 for a value of b. Now, I can take this equation up here and say 1 minus, and instead of b, we put 3, and that gives us our value of a, which is negative 2. Now, you always have to be sure about what is a and what is b, because those are different numbers over different denominators. So for our answer, we have x over x squared minus 5x plus 6, and that equals, now a is negative 2, and a was over the denominator x minus 2, and then you had b was 3, and that was over the denominator x minus 3. And so there is our partial fraction decomposition. Now for the next one, here, again, we have to factor this into two terms. So we have 4x on the top, all over, and this quadratic has a 2 in front of x squared. So one term is going to have 2x, the other is going to have x. Now the two middle terms have to combine to be a positive 3. So that means it's going to be x plus 2 and 2x minus 1. So when we break this up, it's going to be a over 2x minus 1 plus b over x plus 2. now we multiply by this denominator. 2x minus 1 times x plus 2. So all the denominator will cancel out here on the left, leaving 4x. Over here, the 2x minus 1's cancels when we multiply, leaving just x plus 2. And then we're left with 2x minus 1 when we multiply this onto here. All right. So now we expand this out. So 4x equals ax plus 2a plus 2bx. Don't forget that. That's 2b in front of the x minus b. So when we split this up, we have 4x, we have ax, and we have 2bx. So again, we focus on just the coefficients. So 4 equals a plus 2b. And then over here, we have these constants, 2a minus b. But since there's no constant over here, that means that that equals 0. So we'll take this equation and we'll solve it for b. We add b to the other side, so b equals 2a. So now, any place we see a b, we can substitute 2a in place of it. So we'll do that with this equation, 2 times 2a. So what that will become is 4 equals a plus 4a. So 4 equals 5a. So we get a fraction here. 4/5 is what a equals. Now, to get the value of b, we use this equation. And so in place of a, we put what we've already figured out, 4/5. So b equals 8/5. So now a is going to go up here as 4/5, and b, 8/5, is going to go up here. Now it's really awkward to have a fraction within a fraction. Most people don't like writing it that way. Now some books are okay with it, but me personally, I'm not a fan of it. So instead of putting 4/5 up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 4 up here and then multiply this denominator by 5. So 4 over 5 times the quantity 2x minus 1. Now I'm not going to distribute in so you can still see the 4/5 at work here. And then 8/5, I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to do x plus 2. And so here is our partial fraction decomposition for this one. Now for the final one, here, notice that we have multiple terms in the numerator, but here in our denominator, we have 4 terms. So how do we factor this? Well, we factor this by grouping. And so actually that should be squared. That'll be fixed in the worksheet. We have x cubed plus 2x squared minus x minus 2. What we do is we take 2 groups. We take these 2 as one group, and we take these 2 as a second group. And we ask, what can we factor out? X squared. And we're left with x plus 2. Then, from the second 2, what can we factor out? Well, not much. They have nothing in common. But we can take out a negative 1, leaving x plus 2. So now we have 2 terms. We have this, and we have this. And they both have x plus 2 in common. So when we factor out the x plus 2, we're left with x squared minus 1. And x squared minus 1 can also be broken down. That can be broken down into x plus 1 and x minus 1. So this is how our denominator factors. So we have 3x squared minus x plus 2 all over, and we'll write this in factored form, x plus 2 times quantity x plus 1 times the quantity x minus 1. And that's going to equal a over x plus 2 plus b over x plus 1 plus c over x minus 1. So now we'll multiply this by this entire quantity, x plus 2 times x plus 1 times x minus 1. So over here on the left, we're just left with 3x squared minus x plus 2. Now the x plus 2 will cancel, and so a will be multiplied by x plus 1 times x minus 1. For b, x plus 1 cancels, so we multiply x plus 2 times x minus 1. And then for c, the x minus 1 cancels, so we're left with x plus 2 times x plus 1. So now I need to expand out all of these terms. Now there's no need to rewrite this because this on the left won't change. So this is going to become x squared minus 1. This is going to become x squared plus x minus 2. This will become x squared plus 3x plus 2. So when we expand this out, we have ax squared minus a plus bx squared plus bx minus 2b plus cx squared plus 3cx plus 2c. So quite a lot going on here. And let's keep track of it all. X squared, what has x squared? This does, and that does. So that means 3 is going to equal a plus b plus c. Again, like x's, these are x squareds. So we don't worry so much about the x's. We're not solving for them. All we care about are the coefficients in front of them. So next, we look at anything that has an x term with it. So the coefficient here is -1, and that's going to equal b plus 3c. And then finally, the constant, 2. So that's going to equal this and this and that. So 2 is going to equal -a minus 2b plus 2c. Now because this is a 3-variable, 3-equation system, we're going to use a matrix to solve it. And particularly, we're going to use an inverse matrix approach. So what I first need is I need a 3 by 3 matrix. And what I need to do is I need to type in these coefficients. So the first line is A, B, C. They all have coefficients of 1. For the next equation, there is no A, so that has a coefficient of 0. Then B is 1, C is 3. Then the last line, A has a -1 coefficient, then -2, then +2. Now we're going to take the inverse of that, and then we multiply that by a 3 by 1. And we put in these numbers here. 3, whoops, nope, not yet. Didn't mean to press enter, not so soon. We want 3, we want -1, and we want 2. All right. So this means that these are our coefficients. So A equals 5 and 1/3, which is 16/3. B is -3, and C is +2/3. So our partial fraction decomposition, we're going to write out like this. 3x squared minus x plus 2 all over x plus 2 times x plus 1 times x minus 1. That's going to equal A, that's 16/3, and that had a denominator of x plus 2. B is -3 over x plus 1. And then C has 2/3, so 2 over 3 times x minus 1. So there is our partial fraction decomposition. And that's how we do it. So anytime you have 3 or more variables, you always want to use a calculator. If you have 2 variables, you might be able to solve it by hand, but if you need to use it in a pinch, you can always use your calculator. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. For more videos like this, click the subscribe button. You have suggestions or problems you want to see worked out? Type a comment below. To support the channel, click the Patreon link to help keep this going. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, the best way to understand something is to do it.